And KIDO Talk Radio, Kevin Miller in the morning here. Joining us now, State Representative Christy Perry, of course, running for Congress. Representative Perry, thank you for joining us, ma'am.
Well, good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Well, last I saw you, I was actually watching the town hall meeting of the Kootenai County Reagan lovers, and you were quite the hit there by bringing some much-needed humor to the event concerning fellow candidate Michael Snyder turning to the left. People seem to love that.
Well, and I guess I'm going to dare to say, my goodness, the guy just didn't learn very quick either. He continued to do it. So anyway, it was a lot of fun to be up there, and it was certainly a pleasure for me to participate in that. So I'm glad to hear you were listening to that.
Indeed. Just trying to see what's going on. What's it been like for you being on the trail?
It's really an eye-opener for me. It's allowed me to kind of be able to go up and down the state here and talk to so many different constituents and in a lot of different arenas as far as how they think spiritually, how they think religiously, how they think economically, and to really even touch base with them about what their concerns are. So that has been a wonderful experience. And if you know me, you know I'm a people person, so I've really enjoyed that. But I will say that coupling that now with my time in the legislature, that's a task.
I was going to say, what's it like, though, going from being elected as a state representative in a legislative district to the entire 1st Congressional District?
The first thing that I noticed was obviously the distance. Suddenly it goes from a very small district to a very large one that's time-consuming to travel. But I think even more than that, my husband and I usually could run our campaign in our district ourselves. We're very self-sufficient that way. We're minimalist as far as expenses go, and so we were able to handle that. Well, when you expand that out to certainly a state, a district-wide race, that changes things. And the first thing we noticed was, you can't do this by yourself. It takes a lot of volunteers. It takes a lot of people to step up to the plate and be willing to help you, and that has put us in a new position to ask for people to help us. But it's been very rewarding, I think, for both sides of us. And the fundraising is also a different experience when you open up your district that big.
Yeah, people say that's what they struggle with the most when they run for any higher office, if you will, or high office or any office, is the fundraising.
And I could imagine that would be true. Now, for me, we kind of take a different approach anyway, right? I mean, I certainly knew from the very beginning when I got in right around the holiday season that I'm not going to be able to compete with the good old boys and their network. And we knew that from the beginning. But we also knew and understood that we will operate our campaign on a very different level in a very different way. It'll be grassroots. It'll be talking to people one-on-one. And also, I think, too, when it comes to money, I'm very sensitive to that. So, and I'll give you an example. Over the holidays, we actually got into the race right before the holidays, and our campaign team sat down and said, okay, here's our fundraising strategy. And I spoke up and said, you guys, you know what? I'm not going to fundraise during the holidays. I just find that inappropriate. And I think their jaws about hit the table. But I said, look, the holidays are a time where people need to spend their money on their families and they spend their money on charity. And if you remember, and I came in and spoke with you, you guys were doing a turkey drive. The Salvation Army does a charity drive. We had Toys for Tots. We had the Rescue Mission. We had all of those things. And I decided that money was better spent in other places. And I think that overall, the person that wins this race is really going to be that person that puts the needs and the desires of the people of the district ahead of their own political needs. And that was the route that we took. And I'm actually very pleased with that, and I've had a lot of people comment on that.
Well, again, people are so inundated with things. State Representative Christy Perry joining us, running for Congress. So what's it like balancing your campaign, being on the road with your duties and responsibilities in the state legislature?
Tough. I can tell you tough.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. I mean, I'm up at, before 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm usually home, maybe if I'm lucky, right around 10 o'clock.
Wow.
And that is because for me, I mean, this I know is going to be my last session in the legislature, and there are some really big items yet that I feel that need to be addressed, that I would like to kind of put some closure on. And so I'm working very hard to do that. The legislature has speeded up its process this year in response to the Supreme Court decision that came out this summer. And so that has put some additional pressure there. And yet you still want to balance the needs of the people in this district who want you to also come and visit them, as they rightly should. And I'm always happy to do that. So it's a lot of running.
Indeed. You're doing these forums and stuff. What's it like, though, when everybody asks you the question, everybody says, look, I'm a Republican, I'm this, I'm that. You, again, inject humor into these things. So what goes on in your mind when you hear essentially the same answer 3 or 4 times before they get to you?
Oh, yes. And that's a good point. And I think we kind of talked about, there are certain Republican issues we will always align on, correct? We know where people are going to be on the Second Amendment. We want lower taxes, less regulations. There's certain things we will always align on. And I think what people are after, though, is they want to know, though, who you are, right? Are you the person that I think I can tell my problems to? Are you the person who I'm going to be able to call up and you're going to pick up the phone and help me? That, I think, is what they're after. And so I think when we do those forums, what comes out is really the personality of the person, the sincerity of the person, and I think that's what people look for.
When we take a look at how much, and you talked a little bit about this, Representative Perry, money impacts everything. You're going on message, and a lot of folks in the past have won on message. How much of our process has been influenced by money?
I'm sorry, Kevin. How much has it been influenced?
Political process when it comes to, how much influence does money have?
In the campaign world, money allows you to travel, right? We understand that, and allows you to put out your literature. I think what money has done, however, is that it's given the wrong message. When you have candidates come out and say, well, I've raised this much money, it's like the person with the most money wins. It's kind of like, the boys with the most toys win in the end. And you know what? That's not true. And I think that Idaho voters have kind of grown past that now. I think that they are much more savvy. I think they're much more educated, especially those that come out in the primary. And so I'm hoping that we're going to see some of that monetary influence, or just the fact that, yes, we've raised all this money, where it used to make a message and say, well, obviously this is the right person. I think we're actually moving away from that now. And again, I think that people are actually looking at the candidate and at the message.
Christy Perry joining us, state representative, running for Congress. So what's your number one issue?
As far as in Congress, my number one issue, or the issue that I want to attack first?
I would say the number one issue when you're speaking to folks. Are you still listening to hear what people want in the person that's going to replace Congressman Labrador? Some people say, it's taxes, it's defense spending, it's the budget. What's the big issue for you? Obviously, the Second Amendment is very important to you as well.
Well, it is, and I think most people know where I stand on that. That's my lifestyle, not just, what I support. But I think the biggest issue that I hear up and down this state is really lack of leadership. Lack of leadership actually in Congress, a lack of civility. I think they are really disgusted by what they're seeing Congress actually put out and how people are acting. And of course, and those are really over and above the other issues that people are kind of really concerned about. People are still concerned about whether or not I'm going to earn any interest on my money. They've gone through more than a decade now of not being able to get any return on their money. They're concerned about whether their children are going to be able to take over their farms and ranches or their businesses. They're worried about their millennials. And I think that there really is a sense that their children are not going to be able to do as well as they did. And that seems to be pretty rampant up and down the state.
Indeed. Switching over to state issues now, there are some gun legislations going through. Your thoughts on those?
You know, one of them, I believe, was the Stand Your Ground bill. Representative gave that to me, I think, at the end of last week, and I briefly buzzed it. It was a draft, and I read that draft. I don't know if that's really the bill form, so I almost can't comment on it because I don't know what the bill form looks like. I can say, though, that as a Second Amendment supporter, I have certainly gone over those statutes. We have worked on those statutes for a number of years that I have been in the legislature, and I'm not really sure there's a whole lot of room for improvement in that particular arena, but I'm certainly open to looking at it again.
You know, a lot of folks, and Representative Perry, you know this, as a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment, we always fear government control, and thank goodness that we've got Justice Gorsuch on it now, because if not, you know, as you know, there have been many 5-4 victories that could have gone the other way. How crucial is it that we protect the Second Amendment?
You know, in my opinion, I think incredibly crucial. You know, all of us, we operate here in Idaho on those guiding principles that are faith, family, and freedom. And I'm going to be quite frank and say it takes the firearms to back all of those up. I also think, though, that one piece of the puzzle that sometimes gets missed in the conversation is oftentimes the threat is not going to necessarily be from direct legislation, but really through the rules that these agencies work on and want to consistently roll out. So, for example, is it the Department of Justice and I believe ATF are currently thinking about opening up the rules process and changing the definitions of machine gun so that they can incorporate some newer technology. And those are things that kind of are happening under the table that I'm very well aware of and follow that maybe the public isn't necessarily aware of. And I think that's where we also get a threat. Sure.
Representative Perry joining us here, Christy Perry, running for Congress at KIDO Talk Radio. What did you make of the State of the Union?
That was interesting, and I say it for this reason. I didn't get to watch the entire address because I got home late. I caught probably about the last 30 minutes of it, and here's kind of what my takeaway was. I am extremely pleased that a president will be able to stand up there and talk about God, for one. I think that we have come off of a previous administration that walked around the world and was the great apologizer for America, and I was always very offended by that. You know, I had grandparents who fought on the beaches of Normandy. I have a father who's a Vietnam vet. My brother, who's deceased, was a Operation Desert Storm, and my son served in Iraqi freedom. And so for a president to stand up there and defend God and to defend the people in our country who have always consistently defended us, I was extremely pleased with. To the members who sat there and listened, I think that the contempt, they simply could not hide. And it reminded me, if you go back to when Trump was actually elected, I remember watching the media, the liberal media, just absolutely could not hide their contempt. And I really saw that same look on the faces in the audience. And that was disappointing to me. I think that there should be respect shown to the office of the presidency.
Representative Perry, anything else you'd like to share with us? We'd love to have you back on.
Oh, I would love to come back on and talk to you anytime. I'm sorry it's not in person, actually. You are such a magnanimous person to be around, and so I'm sitting in my car on Idaho Street in Boise, actually.
Well, next time, just come on in. We got our wires crossed, but no need. Just come on in, and we'll have you here in person, ma'am.
Really, that would be terrific. I just love what you do for your community.
Well, thank you, and good luck on the trail.
Well, thank you. I hope you all have a great day.
Before you go, though, we always want to make sure we get the word out. For people that are interested in your campaign, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. They can find me at ChristyPerryForIdaho.com. And I'd love to hear from everybody. I'd love to have their support. There's an opportunity to donate, volunteer, join our team, and if you feel you've got a talent you'd like to share, we'd love to be involved with you.
Representative Perry, take care. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
There we have it. Representative Christy Perry joining us here. Your thoughts on her campaign. Phone number is 580-5436, 580-KIDO. You know, it's so funny. Pat from Middleton. And Pat from Middleton showed up at our event. Pat from Middleton, one of our first callers, one of the most, and I mean this in a good way, Pat, polarizing individuals. He always gets people going. He's a fun-loving guy. And he's just bombarding me with Facebook messages. And, Pat, it's not text radio. That's television or something of that nature. You know, the idea, and he wanted to know what we're doing the 10th. I said, look, we're raising donations for the Boise Rescue Mission. We're going to have a good time at Dave & Buster's, a live broadcast. And then he goes on and on about how he can't make it. Pat, it's okay. But please, don't keep your magic to yourself or just to me. Call in. That's why it's talk radio, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Kevin Miller here. Coming up, we're going to talk about a local business that needs your help. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And blessed to be part of your day, Kevin Miller in the morning. Coming up, we'd love to see a 50 for 50, helping the Boise Rescue Mission. We'll hear from Reverend Bill this week on how you can help feed some Treasure Valley families this February. By the way, one more thing from my friend Pat from Middleton. Pat, I don't need to know that you're listening while you're in the bathroom. And no, you're not going to be able to give a video tribute. The point is to bring people out there. I understand you have another event that night, but you're just amazing in a good way. Speaking of amazing, our great friends at Holman Transportation, they need your help. Bob and Sherry Holman, they do a wonderful job of supporting great nonprofit businesses in the Treasure Valley. For many, many years, they were always there at the Canyon County Animal Shelter. They love the community. The community loves them, a great local employer. So now you've got these forged checks going around the Treasure Valley, and they want to get the word out to protect their reputation, to protect the vendors that may be receiving these forged checks from our friends here at Channel 7. Let's take a listen.
I didn't think anybody'd ever have a run like this. You hear the horror stories. I do say, you know, if we didn't have a great bookkeeper and accountant, this could have went on a lot longer.
Hundreds of fraudulent checks are floating around the Treasure Valley. Holman Transportation Services in Caldwell says the company's name is being used on them.
Exactly. Holman Transportation, they do great work. So, again, check with them. More on that in a minute. Traffic and weather together. Let's get you. And we're joined by the lovable Pat from Middleton.
Well, at least you don't call me the international playboy anymore. So I'm glad that doesn't happen.
I think you miss that. I think you miss being the international playboy.
Well, it was quite embarrassing, so I guess it worked. I loved being at the event the other day. That I thought it was a really good turnout, and it was a lot of fun shouting at the TV every time I saw Pelosi's face up there. Looked like she was weaned on a sour pickle. But I got to tell you, I was talking to the bartender, and when he handed me a straw, I shouted out, you know, this is an unsolicited straw. And then I brought it up to the bartender, and he knew about it. So I think there's some good things going on here in Idaho. The young people are starting to know these silly laws that are coming out and stuff like that. He was aware of it. I was surprised that it had just come out that day. So maybe that's good things coming down the pipeline for our country.
Well, indeed. So you will not be attending the 50 for 50 at Dave & Buster's December 10th.
No, my church out in Caldwell, Our Lady of the Valley, is having their annual dinner auction, and I cook a meal, barbecue meal, and last year it went for $1,100, and I'm hoping this year they all had a great time. Said it was that they wanted me to do it again, and hoping the price goes up. All the money goes to the church's building. They're wanting to build some classrooms. Our parish is really growing out there, and so every year we have a dinner auction. At first it started just to pay off the mortgage, and then it stayed to help do improvements and other things. And we have a great turnout and a lot of fun. And
you notice how Pat has just turned this whole thing into promoting Pat's event. Pat, first of all, can't make it. He wants to shoot a video, and then he starts promoting his competing event. We're talking about Pat from Middleton's Barbecue.
My event was probably planned well in advance of yours, probably since last year, but that's okay, And,
I don't think it was planned 50 years ago, buddy.
No. Well, I am that old. I am much older than that. So anyway, it was great running into you. You were harangued by all the crowds. Everyone wanted selfies with you. But you gave me a little bit of a wave and an acknowledgement. That was good enough for me.
Well, we missed you. We missed you off the post-game show. It would have been great. But if people want to help your church out, tell us a little bit more about your event.
Well, it's just, it's an annual event.
Right. Why don't you just say, if people want more information, where can they go?
They can go to the website for Our Lady of the Valley.
Our Lady of the Valley.
Okay. Our Lady of the Valley Catholic Church in Caldwell. If they just Google Our Lady of the Valley, it'll come up. And it's a lot of fun. It supports the event supports a lot of charities like St. Vincent de Paul, and which has done miraculous things out there.
And everywhere. Pat from Middleton, we will miss you, and you always get people talking. We so appreciate you, sir.
Well, thank you. I just listen to Caesar the Crock of Crap so I can call in.
And we so appreciate that, my friend.
Good night, brother. I love you.
Love you, Pat. Take care. Where do we go from here? How about the news with Maggie? You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Maggie.
I didn't think anybody'd ever have a run like this. You hear the horror stories. I do say, if we didn't have a great bookkeeper and accountant, this could have went on a lot longer.
Hundreds of fraudulent checks are floating around the Treasure Valley. Holman Transportation Services in Caldwell says the company's name is being used on them.
It not only hurts our reputation, which we write hundreds of checks in this valley every week. We are a large employer, but we're afraid now when people go to cash our checks.
Holman says last week the company's accountant noticed a withdrawal that was out of place.
So then the next morning she checked again and there was another one. And that's when I said enough.
They contacted the bank, froze the account, and reported this to police. The culprits got a hold of a routing number from an old check belonging to the company that was cashed years ago. Now Holman believes they're duplicating that check, copying one of the company's logos to make it look real, and forging a signature.
Pretty easy to find our logo. We have 200 semis that run around with that logo that's on that check, and the logo they're using is not the logo that is on our checks.
The company wants to get the word out to protect their reputation and to protect the vendors that may be receiving the fraudulent checks.
Our bank says that there's a fraud alert all over our account, but that doesn't help if they don't go to a regular bank. Where they're going is to mostly merchants, who in turn are taking these checks and not finding out, probably in time, that they're stopped.
Meaning that merchant is losing hundreds of dollars. Holman says many of the checks being cashed range from $400 to $800. Police are investigating this issue, and I reached out to them to see how far along they are in that investigation and if they had any suspects, but I haven't heard back yet. Dee?
There we have it from our friends at Channel 7. As I said, I've known Bob and Sherry Holman at Holman Transportation from our time at the Canyon County Animal Shelter. And if you're wondering what that is, not so long ago, we would stay at the Canyon County Animal Shelter, now known as the West Valley Humane Society. And when Barb Hutchinson was there, and they still do great work. And our thoughts and prayers go to that facility because it has been so under siege for many, many years, and we wish the new management well there, and I believe they're bringing it back. I follow them on social media. Well, what we would do is once or twice a year, I believe, when the program was at its all-time high, we would go there and actually live there, and we called the program Kevin in a Kennel. It was Brought to you by Dr. K's veterinary service. Also, it was brought to you by Zamzows. And really what we did is we embraced a challenge brought on by the ASPCA, where the people that adopted the most animals, the most dogs, I believe dogs and cats, would receive money. And that shelter, a great history there that sometimes is often overlooked. That shelter finished, what was it, number 2 in the nation, only lost out by 8 adoptions to a shelter in San Antonio, Texas, which is, as you know, is much larger than Canyon County and much larger than the state of Idaho. And it shows you what can happen when people get together, do things. And part of that, behind the scenes, were the folks at Holman Transportation that are major employers in the area, that love the area, that are good family folks. And, you know, I would watch them come in and I would see how much they cared about the community. So that this is going on is troubling. But I will tell you that the folks at Holman Transportation are outstanding, and certainly by their owners and the leadership there. And, you know, that's something that sometimes the reporters don't get a chance to tell you, to give you a little perspective. And that's the advantage that we have here at KIDO Talk Radio with Kevin Miller in the morning, is we can give you a broader perspective most of the time. And our local reporters have a little bit more sway because there's not a lot of them. There's not a lot of local stories. So their news stories, or what they call packages, can go for as long as 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes. And if you ever go to, let's say, Salt Lake or Portland or Seattle, you'll notice that their stories are more like, 60 seconds at the most. I don't know. But again, we're behind Holman Transportation and appreciate everything that Bob and Sherry do. And I know that's not easy for them. And, maybe somebody watched that Leonardo DiCaprio movie, Catch Me If You Can, but it shows you that there are people in the world today that don't have our best interests, right? And so we've got to protect the people like Holman Transportation that do, and certainly the drivers and everything else. So we're there for you guys. Just to let you know, you're not alone. And these days, that's so important. Big news coming up, the memo controversy. When will it be released? And we can't wait for that, right? We can't wait for this memo to be released. People are already protecting the FBI, but what happens if it's true that the FBI was co-opted by pro-Clinton partisans that wanted to derail Donald Trump? That is a big question. And unfortunately, the computer froze up again. We will get back to that at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. And there's a whole current controversy about that. Whether or not this memo should be released, you have the Democrats and others, even the FBI saying that it shouldn't be released because it could cause some type of national security incident. Haven't we heard that story again and again and again? And aren't we a little tired of hearing about this? That, every time there's something that's uncomfortable that we don't want released, or every time there's something that could cause some issues, well, it's about national security. Well, what about the idea that you have a certain segment of people, and they've outed themselves as a secret society who didn't like President Trump, who wanted to make sure that President Trump was not elected, came up with this false dossier, this false document to derail then candidate Trump. And people are saying, well, it's Russian collusion. If you can't trust the FBI, if you can't trust law enforcement, then why would you turn something over to them? Remember, this is the same administration that prosecuted Tea Party folks. This is the same administration that prosecuted people when we're talking about the NSA, the FISA courts. This has been going on for quite some time with the crew, right? And yet you have Democrats and people in the press that are standing by and saying, well, it's national security. I, for one, am tired of hearing about the national security, and I'd like to know whether or not our election process was co-opted. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you want to get to the truth of the matter? And again, I know our great friend Sean Hannity has been on this nonstop. I mean, I'm almost thinking that Sarah Carter is co-hosting the show she's on so much. But it is true. We need to get to the bottom of this to find out what Peter Strzok was up to, what Lisa Page was up to, and why in the world did we have Hillary Clinton not prosecuted for something that everybody else in America would be, right?
Republicans who have read the memo say it shows the government used the Steele dossier as a basis for obtaining a warrant to snoop on the Trump campaign. Congressman Mark Meadows says Americans have the right to see it.
The spying of Americans took place, and so hopefully we'll see that later today.
Republicans say changes were made to the memo, but only to address grammatical errors and the concerns of the FBI. The agency and the Justice Department have said the memo's release could harm national security. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
Thank you, Rachel. It's always, always, always national security.
My question is now to the FBI director, do they still have access to databases? So there are these large...
The lovebirds?
Yeah, there are these large databases that have communications of journalists in there, of politicians, of businessmen and women, and really maybe just somebody has a relative in Lebanon, you're in the database. Americans. No one should be searching that, I don't think, without judge's permission.
Right. Again, remember, they lost the text, they didn't lose the text, and we have created this giant police state. Now, not to go too Glenn Beck on you, not to go to everything else, but, I mean, you couple that with artificial intelligence, and our lives could be forever changed, right? So back to this memo. This memo has to be released. Has to be released. There has to be transparency. Remember, former President Obama. And what did he promise? Well, you're going to keep your no. Well, you're going to keep your health. No. We're going to have the most transparent administration ever. That didn't happen now, did it? So Donald Trump is under fire for wanting to do the right thing. The right thing is to release the memo. And hopefully that'll happen today, or that'll happen tomorrow morning, preferably about 8 a.m. Eastern time, which was when we start our program here in the Mountain Time Zone. But the idea that this has gone on again and again and again, let's get to the issue. And the press needs to get off their politically correct Politburo soapbox and sit back and say to themselves, you know something? We need to stop this. You know something? We need to make sure that the FBI that investigate folks are above reproach. That's really what it comes down to. Because when you're in a position of authority, you have to be above reproach. Lori, good morning. You're on with Kevin Miller here at KIDO Talk Radio. Hello, Lori.
Hello, Kevin. Good morning. I really enjoyed being there at watching the State of the Union with you and the crowd. It was wonderful, and so thankful for the president and that we elected him. And just want to shout out that this lady that they were interviewing, I don't know, it's one of the Congress people and the Democrats saying president's just trying to put fear into people, and I think that we need to be fearful of centralized government, powerful government, and for him to be taking it down, and we need to just be behind that. And whatever we think about him personally, just let it go and stand up for our country like he does. And it was just so positive. It was so enriching, and the stories that he told and the people that he honored there that night, it was great. And also, I wanted to mention about the fraudulent checks that's going on right now. So sorry for those people. And my brother, Greg, actually started a business called Safe Checks. It's online, and he works with this Frank Abagnale, that the Catch Me If You Can story. And if people go to safechecks.com, they can see he developed a check that can't be duplicated or it can't be washed and that kind of thing. And so that's what happens. Sometimes people will leave their mail out on the street or something to be picked up, and people will wash the check. So it's really important to get a really safe check. So this is called safechecks.com. Just want to let people know. And then I'm happy that you're having Tommy Ahlquist on. I was at an event for him the other day, and I just think he's a great candidate. So
well, do you think?
Thank you.
How do you think he's going to do in the governor's race? Does he have your vote?
Yes, he does, and I think he just has this great business experience, and I know the other candidates, and they're just honorable people, and I'm thankful to have such great examples in Idaho. But I think coupled with the business sense that he has, and I think that we just need that. He really looks into waste and downsizing government functions, and in the schools, there's so many good things that could happen to bring things more into budget, under budget. And we need money for our kids, but we need also to do things in the most economical, business-like way. And he just has some great ideas. So that's my thought. So.
Well, he's coming up in about 13 minutes.
Oh, well, that's great. Looking forward to that. And anyway, appreciate what you do, and just shout out for liberty and stand fast. Don't be intimidated, any of us, and just stand up. So
thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Thank you so much, Ray Amaya, always making the journey to and from the air so entertaining for all of us. We so appreciate your work. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Get this. Think about this. If you live in a small town here in Idaho, the small town of Balot, Ohio, is under fire, and residents are angry that a decades-old city tradition of non-denominational prayer before sporting events in the school district has come to a halt. Rebecca Market is the legal district for the Freedom from Religion Foundation, an organization based out of Madison, Wisconsin. Oh, Greg Pruitt, I feel for you, brother. That informed the school district they were violating the U.S. Constitution.
A constitutional principle that we hold dear. Freedom of religion isn't possible unless our government is free from religion, and that would include our public schools. This has been a law for decades, and the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional a long time ago, so it does need to stop.
Right. Because, let's face it, we've seen what happens when we take prayer out of school. We've seen what happens when we take consequence and discipline and everything else out of education. We seem to really elevate our game when all of a sudden we see what happens when we say, don't worry about faith. Don't focus on making yourself, your community better. Worry about just whatever you can get away with, right? I think we had an administration called the Clinton administration that really embraced that. The idea of prayer in school, what's the harm? Richard in Caldwell with Kevin Miller at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Richard.
Morning, Kevin. I've been listening to the talk, and I haven't heard it all. I listen to you in the morning because I'm driving perimeter of prison. But the hypocrisy of the Democrats right now on this releasing the memo and the national security. Why wasn't this? Why isn't it being pointed out to them that they weren't just strident when Hillary had all of these unsecured memos and messages on her server? And why weren't they so strident about finding all of those lost emails?
Huh.
And all these lost emails that they got from these other people. This is what now you need to expose this, because the FBI and the Department of Justice were the two that were complicit in not bringing this stuff forward. They should be exposed.
Yeah, I don't know what the harm is to exposing people that obviously were not doing their jobs.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's why they're screaming and yelling right now, because they're covering their butt for a job they didn't do in years past under Obama. That's my thought for you for today.
Now, what did you say you do, sir?
I'm a correctional officer at prison in Oregon.
Well, Richard, we appreciate your work. You probably understand what it's like to work with stress. I couldn't imagine doing that for a living. How do you make it through?
Well, you just get used to it. When you're working with criminals, you just get used to it. Kind of like all those people back there.
I see. Well, be safe, sir.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate you listening to KIDO Talk Radio, and thank you for all that you do. Time for traffic and weather. Ben in Garden City, good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio.
Good morning. I just wanted to talk about the freedom of religion that you mentioned with that school that they're outlawing prayer in. You know, the Constitution is, or the Bill of Rights was interesting because what they did with that is they said that these rights shall not be infringed. They understood that these rights came from God, not from man, not from government. They weren't given by government. So the right of the people to have free speech, prayer, religious freedom isn't something that affects government by saying, well, we're going to allow it in our schools. If it did, why don't they say, well, we're going to have to make sure none of the people in government have guns? Because how can the people have a right to bear arms if the government has guns? It's the same mentality.
Well, I would agree with you on that. And again, it comes down to standards and safety and really the basic principles of our foundation.
Yeah. Right. It has nothing to do with whether schools allow prayer. Now, if schools were sponsoring prayer and saying that we're going to have prayer, then there could be an argument. But if they're allowing the teachers to make that decision on their own, whether they're going to have prayer in their classes, that's a whole different story.
Ben, thank you for listening to KIDO Talk Radio. You have a great day, sir.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you. Coming up, Dr. Alkos will join us. We'll get his thoughts on the campaign, a big event for him coming up next week as well. Plus,
remember when former FBI Director James Comey announced just days before the last presidential election that he was reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server? According to emails obtained by CNN, it was Peter Strzok who co-wrote the first draft of the letter that Comey sent to Congress to announce that reopening. Strzok went on to work with fellow FBI official Lisa Page on the special counsel's Russia probe when emails made public show the two insulting President Trump. In Washington, Jill Nato, Fox News.
Oh, so now Peter Strzok is a good guy. Funny how CNN just discovered it. CNN, home of... I think Sean Hannity has a few words for them. Good morning, Kevin Miller.